Hey everybody, Captain Kimo here, and in this video I am going to cover my HDR workflow. Now this is a current workflow that I've developed, and normally I change my workflow over time as I learn more techniques and methods. So this is my current method, and the exposures we're going to be using for this was taken in Portland, Maine, and you can see here this is the evenly exposed image where you have everything evenly exposed. And then here is the underexposed image. We're going to use this for the highlights here, the bright areas in our photo. And the next is the overexposed image, and this will be used for the foreground, all the shadows here in the foreground. So let's go ahead and get started with the workflow. First I'm going to go into Photomatics and I'm going to create my HDR image, and then I'll take that and go into Photoshop to use a couple of Topaz plugins and sharpen the image a little bit and use some color adjustments in Topaz, and then I'm going to take it into Lightroom and do the final post processes in there. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have my Photomatics window open, and I'm going to drag those three exposures that I just showed you, and I'm just going to drag them from the directory here and drop it right into the Photomatics window, and we get a little merged HDR processing window or menu here that pops up. I'm just going to click OK, and then we have another menu that'll pop up, and click OK there. Now we have our pre-processing options, and I'm going to check this off, the align source image. I am going to leave that off, and then reduce noise. I am going to reduce it, all source images, by about 110%, and I will go ahead and just leave chromatic aberration out, and that's good. I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. Okay, so once Photomatics has merged the exposures together, we are in the tone mapping window, and I plan on using detail enhancer here instead of tone compressor, so I'm going to use detail enhancer. And I'm just going to go with the preset. This is a default preset, and we'll just start from there, so we'll work from that. And let's go ahead and boost the saturation up. I'm thinking about 70% here, and then we will bring the strength and play around with the strength, and now the luminosity, just to kind of brighten up the image. And as I bring the luminosity up, I'm probably going to want to bring the detail contrast to darken the details. And it's starting to look good, so I'm going to move down here. Lighting adjustment, I'm probably going to want to bring it to the left a little. This is going to be by eye, so I'm just going to play around with it just to see where I want it to fall, and that looks good. Now that I have that, I'm going to want to bring the black point in because it's lacking a little the dark area, so I'm going to bring in the black point, kind of darken everything up a little bit. And that looks good. I'm going to leave the gamma alone. And the temperature, I'm going to see if I want it cooler or warmer, and I certainly like it cooler, so I'm just going to bring it down a little to the cooler side. Now for smoothing, at this point, smoothing, if you bring it all the way to the left, it becomes very very grungy, very aggressive. Some people like it. If you bring it to the right, it'll get lighter and a lot less grungier. So it actually, I thought it actually looked better right around where it was. So we're gonna actually, it looks pretty good with the extra detail there. So I'm gonna leave it to the left. Let's go we're gonna leave saturation highlight. That's gonna make a difference if I move it, or it will, but I think that might just be a little too much on the highlight. So let's go ahead and skip that. We'll skip the saturation shadows, or let me pull it down a little bit and see if I like my foreground. Saturation shadow will desaturate the dark areas, so I'm liking it back where it was, so we'll go ahead and just leave it back there at 0. I'm just going to type that in. Shadow smoothness, we can bring that up, and that should smoothen out the shadows a little bit in the foreground. Looks like it's going to darken the entire image, which doesn't look too bad. So we'll do that. I'm noticing right now that the sky might be a little too dark, so I'm going to bring back the strength a little bit to darken up, or to brighten up the sky and maybe darken up the foreground. Okay, so I kind of actually liked it where it was. I will play around with the sky and might lighten it up a little bit in Photoshop. So we're pretty much done here. So this is the first stage here. I use Photomatics to create the HDR image. So now we're gonna go to the second stage where we will take it into Photoshop, and I'll show you what I do there using Topaz plugins. So I'm just gonna hit the process button, and we're gonna go right into Photoshop. Okay, so here is our HDR image in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer here, and I'm going to denoise the photo. And the reason I'm going to denoise it is because of the grain, the noise in the image. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with that layer here that I just created, the duplicate layer. So I'm going to go ahead and into filters and into Topaz denoise, and I am going to reduce the noise. And once I have my denoise window open, I will use the JPEG preset, and once I click it, it'll remove most of the noise out of the image. So I'm just going to do that and hit OK. Once I remove the noise, I'm going to go ahead and run Topaz Adjust on the photo, and this is going to give it a little more of a pop. So I'm going to go ahead into Topaz and run Topaz Adjust. Okay, so now that I have my Topaz Adjust window open, I am going to start with the Classic Collection and go into the Brilliant Cold preset, and we're going to start from there. And I'm going to work with the global adjustment here and start playing around with it to kind of get the photo looking more the way I like. So I'm going to play around with the contrast here. If you bring it all the way to, or if you bring it towards the left there, it'll reduce the contrast. It'll give it more contrast if you bring it to the right. So I'll leave it right about there. Next, I will play with the protect the highlights here. So I'll bring that and see if I like it to the right or to the left. And then the shadows, I will play with that. And that looks good. Let's go ahead and close the global adjustment, and then go down into the finishing touches here. And I might want to bring down the warmth, make it somewhat cooler. Well, let's see if I like it warmer. No, cooler looks good. And that looks pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and click that and maybe play with the vignette a little bit. Alright, so that looks good. And then I will go ahead and close that out. Close that out. Let's see that's the before, and then this is the after. So let's go ahead and click OK, and we'll go back into Photoshop. Okay, so here is the this is the after. So here's the before, and then this is after Topaz denoise and Topaz Adjust. Next, what I'm going to do is I am going to duplicate the image, and I'm going to unsharpen the image, or sharpen it a little more. In Photoshop, it's called unsharpen. When I don't know why they call it unsharpen, but it actually sharpens the photo. So I'm going to go ahead and use the unsharp mask. Click on that, and you can see here that it's pull up the window here. It can sharpen up the photo a little. Let's see if I bring the amount here, and if you go all the way to the right here, it'll sharpen up the photo. So we can play with that and the radius, as well as the threshold. And usually I like it around 100 and radius 1, but for this photo I think I am going to probably put it around 2 and 150. So if I click and hold on this a little bit, you can see that this was the before, and then this is after the sharpening. So it looks a little better with that. So I'm going to hit OK on there, and it looks very nice now that the image looks a little sharper. So this is the before, and then this is the after. You might not be able to see this in the video because of the quality, but it really gives the photo a little more clarity. Okay, so overall I like the photo right now as is. The only thing I don't like is the lighthouse. It's a little dark here, a little too dark for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that layer here, the upper layer, and I'm going to change the blend mode, and I'm going to change it to screen, and this will lighten everything up. Of course, I don't want everything lightened, so I'm going to add a layer mask here, and this will give me my mask, and I will invert this mask with Control I, Command I on a Mac, and this will hide everything on this layer. So we're going to use the white paintbrush tool to paint that back in. Now we can also use Topaz Remask to mask out just that little area, which actually might be easier. So if I wanted to do this with just a mask, I will use the paintbrush and with white at about 20% and just start painting in the lighthouse to make it brighter. Of course, it's not perfect. You can see a little halo around the lighthouse, which is not good, so I'll go ahead and zoom in on that later to fine-tune it. Again, if I use Topaz Remask, it actually might be a little easier to do that, to make it a little perfect. Let's go ahead and change that. I use the X to switch back to black, and then I'll use 100%, and we're just gonna paint that back in so it doesn't give that halo effect around the image. And that looks good. So this is the before and this is the after. So it might be a little too bright down here, so I am going to go and change the this back to about 20% and actually paint it down a little bit. It might be a little too dark down or too bright down here. And okay, so this is before and then this is after. So that looks good. Now that I think we're done here in Photoshop. Usually I'll do another effect, an Orton effect, but for this particular photo I feel it's nice and it works right now as is. So we're going to go ahead and go to the third stage, which is I'm going to go into Lightroom to play with the colors and tones and just sharpen it up just a little more. So let's go ahead and go into Lightroom and I'll show you what I do there. So here I am in Lightroom, and here is the Develop module. So I'm going to go ahead and click that menu bar off so we can get a better view here. And I'm just going to go and play around with the all these little sliders and effects to make the image a little more nicer. Let's get started, and I'm going to start with the effects here. I want to play with the vignetting just to kind of draw the eye more towards that center here, the center of the photo. So that looks good, and then I'm going to play with the midpoint and just see whether I want the vignette to be more deeper or just a little towards the outer edges. So that looks good right about there. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now I'm going to go right to the detail and play with the detail. Probably try to bring out some more detail. I'm going to zoom in here, and then where it says sharpening, I'm going to just bring it to the right, and you can see it's sharpening up the photo even more. And I don't want it too sharp, but just enough to give it some extra crispiness. And that looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to go straight up to the basics here and play with the these adjustments here. The temperature, I'm going to play around with it. See if I kind of want it cooler or warmer, and it looked pretty good right about there. And the tint, I'm going to play with that too, and it looks good there. It looks a little exposed, so I'm going to bring down the exposure a little bit, and then maybe bring down the or bring up the recovery light here. And we will play with the fill light just to kind of bring out some of the details there in the shadows. And it's looking good. I'm going to bring down the brightness a little more. And that looks good. We're going to bring up the clarity in here. So if you bring it up, it's just going to make it look really aggressive. So right about there looks good. I'm going to use the gradient here, the gradient option, and I'm gonna just kind of click and drag up here like this. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to play with the foreground here to see if I like the exposure brighter, and I'm actually wanting it darker just to kind of draw the eye right around this area here. So about a -19 or -20 looks good, and there's a little cast to there, so I don't know if I want that cast. I want to bring it down and just maybe play around with different color cast. And actually right about there doesn't look too bad. And let's play around with some of the other options. Contrast, adjustment, and we're going to bring the clarity up here, so we'll give it a little more detail right there in the foreground. Maybe even play some with the sharpness too. And that doesn't look too bad. I'm gonna bring the exposure back up a little bit, and then maybe bring this, make it just a little warmer. And that looks good. And we can click this. This is the before, and then this is the after. So that looks good. I'm gonna hit done there. Next, we're gonna use another gradient here. I'm gonna bring it across the top. I'm gonna click up and drag down here, and this is where I think I'm gonna want the exposure up. So kind of brighten up the sky some. And with that, I'm going to want to probably bring the clarity down on that sky, so it gives the cloud a little more of a fluffy look instead of a aggressive look to the clouds. So this is before, or this is the before, and then this is the after. So before and after. So I'm actually, this might be a little too dark here in the foreground. I'm going to go ahead and readjust that, and maybe bring the brightness back up. Okay, we'll just go ahead and leave it like that. I'm going to hit done there. So let's go ahead and play with the tonal curve here, and then we can play with the highlights and brighten up all the highlights there. And we will play with the lights, and we'll brighten up the lights. The darks we can bring, I'm probably going to want to bring that up a little bit too. Oh, maybe not. I'm just going to leave it right about there. And I'm going to leave the shadows down. So this was before, and this is after. So let's go ahead and close that, and we will play with the colors a little bit here on the luminosity, and we will see if we want the reds brighter. And it doesn't look like I want the reds any brighter. Check out the oranges. Oranges looks better darker, so I'm going to bring it down. Yellows looks good, a little brighter, so we'll leave it up. Greens, there's no greens, so we won't even play with that. And then the blues, looks like there's some dark blues that actually look better brighter, so we'll do that. And then the purples, purple looking good, a little brighter. Magentas, same there, so we'll just leave it right about there. So this was before here, and this is after. Let's go ahead and play with saturation a little now. I believe the orange might be just a little too vibrant, so I'm going to bring it down some. And the same with the yellow, but it looks good the way it is. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and let's see what's next. Now, split toning, I tend to play with this sometimes just to see what happens, and we're going to just pick a warm color here, and that actually looks pretty nice. It gives it like a different tone there. Shadows, I'm going to use a little blue tone. That actually looks pretty cool, but let's play with the balance here, just to kind of play around with it, so it gives the image a very unique look. So that actually looks pretty cool. So this is before, and then this is after. Now, if you don't like it, the split toning, you can always turn it off here like that. But the toning actually adds a little mood to the photo, so I'm going to leave it there like that. So I'll close that, and we are done. That's pretty much it for Adobe Lightroom. Alright, so let's go ahead and cover what we just did. So here is our 3 exposures that we use for the HDR image. This is the evenly exposed image, and this is the underexposed image, and this is the overexposed image. We took those 3 images and we merged them together into Photomatics to get this HDR photo. and we went to Photoshop to use a couple of Topaz plugins to create this image, and then we went into Lightroom to create our final HDR image. So that completes my entire workflow. Of course, it's different for every photo because every photo requires something different. If you want to find out more about my work, visit CaptainKimo.com and you'll come to a website. It looks like this. This is my website. And if you want to learn more about Photomatics, click on this button here, and this will take you into the Photomatics area of my website where you can learn more about the program. If you want to learn more about Topaz, you can click the blue button, and this will take you into the Topaz area where you can learn more about Topaz. And if you want to learn more about some advanced techniques, you can check out my ebook or lifetime membership over there at CaptainKimo.com by clicking this little ebook area. And if you haven't already done so, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And until next time, this is Captain Kimo signing out.